the mysterious beauty of wild, untouched nature, the emerald forest, the perfect silence broken only by bird song. This is the true beauty that fascinates me. And in the history of art, there is only one period that can truly reflect the mesmerizing nature, the nature I study with care, and the beauty of which I seek to understand. It's the art of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. The main founders of the Brotherhood were William Holman Hunt, John Everett Millais, and poet as well as artist Dante Gabriel Rossetti. They gathered in 1844 and agreed to follow their own set of principles, positioning themselves in opposition to academic art, Victorian formalism, and hypercritical morality. One of the features of the Pre-Raphaelites' work is inspiration from the aesthetics of the Middle Ages. The poetry of Dante Alighieri, Arthurian legends, poetry of Shakespeare, as well as of Keats, Tennyson, and Christianity. Dante Gabriel Rossetti was no exception. He was actually the first who painted the work bearing the initials of the Brotherhood. This is the Girlhood of Mary Virgin, which was followed by the Annunciation, a logical continuation of the first work. As we already know, in those days, artists desperately needed models to embody their various ideas. And so those who first came under Rossetti's gaze were his own relatives. His mother, who was portrayed as Saint Anne, his sister, who posed for the Virgin Mary in both works, and his brother William, who became the model for Archangel Gabriel. Yet things will become much more interesting later in the story of Rossetti's models, as he will carefully choose beautiful women for his works. Women who would go on to become not only his greatest muses, Gabriel Dante Rossetti had a very interesting background, since his father was an Italian poet and scientist in exile, because he was the founder of the secret society known as the Carbonari. His mother came from the famous Polidori family. Her brother was the famous John William Polidori, the English writer and physician to Lord Byron. He was the one who wrote the first horror story about vampires. His sister was also rather famous. She was a poetess, and this is actually Dante's illustration to her story Goblin Market, which was devoted to another sister of them who was also a writer. And guess what? Their brother William was a well-known writer and literary critic. Gabriel Rossetti's second name was given in honor of Dante Alighieri. He worked on translations of Italian poets and the Divine Comedy. During the first 10 years of his creative life, apart from Arthurian legends, he also painted lots of works dedicated to Divine Comedy. Gabriel was a highly romantic and passionate artist. And at the very beginning of his career, Rossetti met one of his first models, who also became one of the most important models for the entire movement. This was Elisabeth Siddal, who also became his student and the only woman whose artworks were exhibited among Pre-Raphaelites. Indeed, she became the first who embodied the Pre-Raphaelite ideas of female beauty. William Holman Hunt, Walter Deverell painted her, as well as John Everett Millais with his The Most Wonderful Painting, Ophelia. And yes, this is she who became ill from spending hours in a bathtub filled with cold water while posing. He decided to marry her, and shortly before the wedding, he painted her as the Queen of Hearts. Unfortunately, their marriage did not last long. After giving birth to a stillborn child, she suffered from severe postpartum depression and rheumatic pain. One day, she died from an overdose of laudanum. Her death was a devastating blow to Rossetti. Along with her, he buried all of his unpublished poems. He also painted her posthumous portrait, an idealized image of Beatrix from the poem La Vita Nuova of Dante Alighieri, where Beatrix is depicted at the moment of her death. The red dove symbolizes his love, while the white poppy, the opium that killed his beloved. Her death became a turning point both for his artistic career and his personal life. From that moment, the endless guilt and grief became an inseparable part of his existence. It is unknown whether Lizzie Siddal knew about the existence of Fanny Cornforth, yet she, whom Rossetti met 3 years before his marriage with Elisabeth Siddal, was his model and lover during Elisabeth Siddal's absences. This is a remarkable story of how a prostitute became the model, lover, a woman whom he supported, maintained until his final days, even granting her the rights to several of his paintings. After Elisabeth Siddal's death, Fanny moved into Rossetti's house and became his housekeeper, as people delicately called her. His brother William praised her beauty, but said she has no charm of breeding, education, or intellect. Yet their relationship was never hidden. She became the only model depicted in sensual, voluptuous way. For one of Rossetti's patrons, Fanny's appearance was too earthy, and so the artist turned to ethereal beauty of Alexa Wilding. A dressmaker and a would-be actress, she was, surprisingly, the only one of his principal muses with whom he had no romantic relationship. At the same time, she was a true friend to him, and like Fanny, she supported him and stayed by his side during his final years. Even after his death, she regularly visited his grave to place a wreath. We've now come closer to the main heroine of our story, our beautiful lady in green, Jane Morris, the wife of none other than William Morris, the famous English textile designer, poet, and artist, whom she met between 57th and 59th at the Oxford Union Library. At that time, a team of Pre-Raphaelites, including Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Edward Burne-Jones, and William Morris, were painting mural illustrations of Arthurian legends, with Jane and her sister as models. William Morris, who fell deeply in love with her, proposed a marriage, and Jane, though never in love with him, accepted the proposal and became the part of the renowned design firm Morris & Co., where she worked as an exceptionally talented embroideress. The fact is that by 1861, Rossetti was already a partner of Morris & Co., where he created designs for stained glass and other decorative objects. For some reason, in 1869, Morris and Rossetti decided to rent a country house as a summer residence, a place that, for Rossetti and Jane Morris, became their shared retreat, where nothing and no one could interfere with their relationship. This painting was created at the start of their strange relationship, in which Dante Gabriel depicted a scene from Purgatorio, the story of a woman who was imprisoned and later poisoned by her husband. It was a kind of self-deception in which he portrayed his beloved under the power of William Morris, an idea he would later develop in what is perhaps his most famous work, Persephone. Persephone, or Proserpine in the Roman version, was the daughter of Demeter. Proserpine was abducted by Hades, or Pluto, and taken to his underworld realm as he had fallen in love with her. Demeter searched for her endlessly, and in her grief, the earth ceased its former course. The sun dimmed, darkness fell, and the land stopped bearing fruits, turning into a barren desert. Jupiter then sent Mercury to command Hades to release Proserpine. But Pluto, or Hades, committed a cunning act. He gave Persephone a pomegranate, and after she ate a few of its seeds, she could no longer return to the world of the living. From then on, Persephone was bound to stay with him for half the year and spent the other half with her mother. Thus, the Greeks explained the changing of the seasons. And indeed, every summer Jane would return to him at their Kelmskott manor, where they enjoyed each other's company. In this way, Rossetti so clearly and poetically depicted the story of his own tragic love for Jane. Her recalled blue eyes, filled with sorrow, and her dramatic gaze speak of the other world, the realm of the dead, to which she is forever bound. At that time, he began drinking heavily and taking large amounts of painkillers, and his health gradually deteriorated. During this period, amid his inner torment, his love for Jane, his Persephone, was most obsessive. The emerald, bitter beauty of Proserpine led me to another, one of Rossetti's last paintings, A Daydream, or Monna Primavera, where the beautiful, pensive Jane sits in a stunningly rich colored gown, surrounded by branches, much like the Dryad, holding a book and a flower, a symbol of love, for which Dante also wrote a sonnet. And it was this work, just like Proserpine, that I felt a strong desire to paint myself. By the time Proserpine was painted in 1874, he had already suffered a severe nervous breakdown, followed by his dependence on substances. Jane had already begun to distance herself from him, although she, like Alexa Wilding, continued to support him, posing for him at Kelmskott Manor. In 1874, Morris removed him from his business. The fiction no longer worked. William could no longer ignore the relationship between his wife and Gabriel. Rossetti left the manor and began to live the life of recluse, a life darkened by his addictions and increasing mental instability. 2 years before his end, he painted The Daydream. By that time, he was already partially paralyzed. Thus, this painting, like the last 3 works of his life, was a final act of will, a glimmer of light in his fading existence. In it, he painted his beloved, his thoughts, capturing his own story and his vision of beauty. He died in the home of a friend on Easter Sunday, where he had been vainly trying to recover his health. It's interesting that in some of his paintings, despite that Jane Morris had dark hair, he depicted her with auburn tinge, like that of his late wife. It was precisely such a Proserpine that became his final work in the last year of his life. In response to the remark that Rossetti's women are horrible yet fascinating like a serpent, the admirer of his art replied, "They are dreams. He used them for something in his mind caused by the death of his wife. I may be quite wrong there, but significantly they all came after the death of his wife." Perhaps Elisabeth Siddal left a mark on the soul of Gabriel to such extent that all the women who came after were but shadows, ways of reaching out to that distant and unattainable beauty. We may regard Rossetti differently as a person who often acted dishonestly and basely, but we know for sure that in this endless grief and guilt over the death of his wife, he suffered through and created beautiful portraits of unearthly women who became symbols embodying enchanting and extraordinary stories and myth, repeated and reinterpreted through the centuries. Unearthly women signifying more than the beauty of the flesh.
My nesečka, my assistant, yes.